To many people, Michelle Pfeiffer just simply is Catwoman. I mean, Anne Hathaway, she did a great job, don't get me wrong, but Pfeiffer just might never be topped in my opinion. I mean, as far as iconic female superhero movie characters go, she's right up there with Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately, unlike Wonder Woman with Batman v Superman, Catwoman was not able to use her success in Batman Returns to do her own movie. However, plans actually were in motion to do just that in the mid-1990s. Yes, we were actually going to get a Catwoman movie that would have seen Michelle Pfeiffer return with Tim Burton back in the director's chair. So, what if it happened? What if, despite Batman Forever being such a big success, Warner Brothers decided to still risk a Catwoman movie, arguing that since it's not a Batman movie, they could get away with trying to do darker things with it. So, simply put, what if Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman had her own solo movie? So somehow, Michelle Pfeiffer gets her own Catwoman movie in the 90s. So what was it going to be like? Well, first of all, it was going to be written by Daniel Waters, who is one of the credited writers of Batman Returns. However, it should be noted that Waters and Tim Burton didn't exactly agree with each other a lot. Burton was known to be more keen on the ideas of Wesley Strick, who he actually brought in to revise the Batman Returns script because he really didn't like Daniel Waters' ideas. So just keep that in mind that Wesley Strick didn't touch the Catwoman script yet. Daniel Waters wrote it alone, and I do imagine Tim Burton probably would have hated this script, so just keep that in mind as I go along with it. So now the plans for the movie itself were for it to be radically different compared to the previous movie, but not really tone-wise. It was going to still be very dark, but on an aesthetic level, it was going to be literally night and day compared to Batman Returns. It was also going to be more of a straight-up social commentary on gender norms, sexual harassment, and gender inequality. Now, this movie was actually not even going to be set in Gotham City, but in a movie-exclusive city known as Oasisburg, a described combination of Palm Springs, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Disneyland. It was going to be filled to the brim with a bunch of tacky billboards encouraging people to relax and unwind. And it apparently was going to look so sickeningly perfect that it would actually be nauseating. So basically a bit like Suburbia and Edward Scissorhands, I would imagine. Basically, it would be what white 1950s Americans would call a perfect city. So we'd see Selina Kyle is no longer Catwoman, because she's actually been suffering from amnesia after the events of Batman Returns, when she, tried to electrocute herself in Max Schreck. So we learned that her body was actually found without her Catwoman suit, and she was brought to the emergency room, where they managed to cure her bullet wounds. Selina's mother then came to visit her at the hospital, and decided that once she was physically recovered, that she was going to take Selina with her back to Oasisburg in order to psychologically recover, with hopes of, obviously, her memories coming back. So we see that Selina has actually joined an all-women support group for abuse victims, which is run by a very overly happy woman named Penelope Snuggle. Yeah, that was actually going to be her name, I'm not kidding. And we actually find out that the women in this group are encouraged not to act out. They even use the quote-unquote myth of Catwoman as a way of deterring women from standing up against men, otherwise they become terrorists. Oh boy, okay, so I should note before we keep going that this movie is pretty sexist, so this really is actually pretty tame compared to what we're going to be getting later, just as a fair warning if you're easily triggered. So we then see that the city of Oasisburg actually has its own group of superheroes called the Cult of Good. Yes, that's their name, and it's made up of all-male superheroes that have even worse names than that, including Mammoth, a big muscly guy who eats a lot, of course, Spooky, an androgynous spectre-like character, Adonis, who is obviously incredibly full of himself like you would expect, and actually spends most of his time signing autographs. Cactus, a biker who has a detachable arm that he can retrofit with guns and spears. And then finally, the leader, Captain God. Oh, Jesus, these names. But something interesting I actually wanted to point out is that they actually don't know each other's secret identities, which I think is a little cool, because most superhero groups tend to know each other's identities, so I think it's kind of cool that this one doesn't. Now, we actually see that the people in this town are weirdly devoted to this group. Like, people are chanting their names cultishly, they gush over how amazing they are, and even the TV reporters do play-by-play of their fights, saying, oh, and of course, here comes this person, and oh, here comes this person doing their famous catchphrase. Like literal sports play-by-play instead of like actually covering the news. And now Selina obviously thinks that this is pretty weird and more than a little bit obnoxious. So now throughout the movie, we keep cutting back to this black cat that's lying down in the snow back in Gotham City. A cat that's clearly injured. And now Selina gets regular flashbacks of this cat throughout the movie as she slowly recovers her memory. Now throughout the movie, she also gets stalked throughout the city by a Mexican woman who's been living in a hut in Selina's backyard. Creepy. It turns out that she's actually the one who took Selina to the hospital back in Gotham. And Selina's mom is actually letting her stay there as a way of thanking her. But Selina understandably finds her to be more than a little bit creepy. And so Selina is actually living with her mother in Oasisburg, and her mother is really strict with her. We see that she's actually been strict with her from a very young age, grooming her into becoming a ballerina champion. Though I'm guessing that might have been changed to gymnastics, because that would explain why she's able to do like backflips and cartwheels despite having no training that we know of. So now her mother was actually going to be more than a little bit bitchy, just to put it lightly. She was going to be saying things like, oh, you need to stay on a diet since being reasonably pretty is the only thing you have going for you. Ouch. So Selina actually does have a job in the city, working at Frank's Palace, which is a casino where she and the other workers are made to wear very revealing outfits and are ordered to try and show off their parts as much as possible, or else they'll get fined for it. Holy shit. As in, they'll get fined if they don't try to show off their body parts. Jesus. And so now Selina's employers have no time for her amnesia and are especially rude to her, making fun of her bullet wound scars that her uniform exposes, which is more than a little bit messed up in my opinion. So now Selina would actually make a friend with a woman named Kelly, who actually has a pretty good line in my opinion about how people should never work at a place where the objective is for other people to have fun, because nothing brings out the worst in people like helping other people have a good time, which is so true. Unfortunately, her time there doesn't exactly get any better when the owner, Frank, actually tries copying a feel, and then he makes fun of sexual harassment. Like, he makes it a joke as though it doesn't exist. Then she gets hit on again by Brock Leviathan and Louis Lane, no relation to Lois Lane, who are the two most eligible bachelors in the city. Now, her co-workers become extremely jealous of Selina and start calling her names behind her back. We then see that Selina's mother works as a dancer at the club. Awkward. So now while she's on her way home from work, she sees the Mexican woman again, and she decides to follow her and basically ask, what's your problem? And she actually falls through a hole in the ground and accidentally finds the Cult of Good's lair. And she actually sees that the Cult of Good are total phonies. They've been paying off people to pretend to be criminals. It turns out that they've actually been doing this for a really long time, going from city to city, making the inhabitants fall in love with them, and then ditching them when the money is good. So now Selina nearly gets caught spying on them, but is saved from exposure by the Mexican woman, who actually holds her own against the Cult of Good by using karate moves. That's cringy. In the end, though, she ends up being shot and killed by Captain God, which is pretty brutal. After the cult leaves, Selina approaches her body, and that's when she's approached by a black cat. Not the same black cat from the flashbacks, but just a regular black cat. Now, this cat actually guides her to a key around the woman's neck. Selina then takes the key, and she brings it back to the hut and uses it to open up a chest. Now, inside the chest, she finds her Catwoman outfit. So then, Selina's vision of the black cat in the snow turns into a vision of herself lying down in the snow as Catwoman, in pain, dying of her injuries. And we actually see that the woman actually took off her Catwoman outfit to stop her from being exposed at the hospital, which was pretty cool of her. Then we see that Catwoman's actually destroying her childhood bedroom, which is filled with pink garish ballerina bullshit, just like she did to her apartment in the last movie. She then grabs a fucking sledgehammer and hilariously destroys a billboard telling her to relax and be happy. So now a little girl at the jewelry store tries to point out the fallen billboard to her mom, and she nearly gets slapped slap for daring to interrupt her. But thank God, Catwoman grabs the woman's hand and tells her that mothers shouldn't hit their daughters. She then promptly punches the woman right in the face and destroys the necklace that she was about to buy. Oh, that's so satisfying. So now the crowd outside is just pissing themselves in fear, but then a cocky sexist fraternity guy tries to be like, oh, it's just a woman, she's no threat. Did I mention that this movie is very sexist? She then promptly whips him right in the mouth, very satisfying. So then the people start, trying to take pictures of her, and she's just like, oh no, please, no flash photography. A guy then tries to push this big button that actually summons the Cult of Good for help, but Catwoman beats him to it. She pushes the button instead, and she just says, bring it on, come out and play. So then the cult arrives to find Catwoman is just seductively laying down in the middle of the street, and they think that she's just going to be so damn easy. But instead, she kicks the ever-loving crap out of all of them, and even catches a bullet in her fucking teeth, which is weird, but undeniably badass. She then hits them right where it hurts, in their wallets, by burning down their merchandising shop and escaping into the sewer. So now after the battle's over, we actually follow Spooky on his way home, and we see him take his uniform off, only to then discover that he's actually a woman pretending to be a man, which Catwoman would then see because she's secretly watching from a nearby fire escape. Plot convenience. And now this just goes to show just how sexist the people of the city are, that women feel like they have to pretend to be men in order to do anything with some damn dignity. So now later on, this is also plot convenience, we see Captain God actually followed Catwoman home and discovers that she's Selina Kyle. Yeah, there's a lot of people following each other in this movie. Get used to that. And so now the next day we actually see the mayor order the Cult of Good to kill Catwoman because, and I'm so shocked to hear this, apparently people don't really want to stay in Oasisburg because the Cult of Good failed to protect them. So they understandably want to spend their vacations elsewhere, and the mayor doesn't want to lose their business. So now we then see Selina decides that she needs to get some distance between herself and her overbearing mother in order to give herself some more room to grow. So she actually begins sleeping in the Mexican woman's vacant hut in the backyard. So we then see that even the radio people are sexist. The radio broadcasts are run by an extremely unlikable man with an extremely bad name, named DJ Oink. Yes, that's his real name. And he makes several insulting and absolutely disgusting comments on how much he thinks Catwoman turns him on. Ew, on public radio, ew. So now Selina understandably becomes really annoyed at these radio broadcasts, but they kind of serve a purpose because they finally give her the confidence and the anger she needs to stand up to her boss when he once again tries to make a pass at her, saying he has some positions opening up, ew. And she just basically tells him he's a walking sexual harassment charge and to just stop, which is pretty damn hilarious in my opinion. But then he cringily tries to call her a man-hater, but she just says, I don't hate men, I just hate you. And she then threatens to expose his treatment of his staff to his wife and demands that he treat his employees with more respect. And now Frank is hilariously scared shitless of the new Selina, and her coworkers are just in absolute awe of her newfound confidence. So now after that hilarious scene, she bumps into Brock Leviathan again, and we see that his dog, which was actually pretty calm with her the day before, is now barking hysterically at her, because it senses the change inside of Selina. So we then see that Brock actually has a British butler named Jeff, and she gets some serious flashbacks of Bruce Wayne and Alfred, but not real flashbacks, really, just like fragments, so she doesn't remember them completely. So then Brock asks her out to dinner, and we actually see that he has a bandage on his hand in the exact same place that she bit Captain God. Oh boy. His identity as Captain God is actually further confirmed when he catches a martini glass from falling with noticeable speed, but despite this revelation, she does agree to meet him for a dinner date at 8 o'clock. So we then see Selina actually defying Oasisburg conventions once again when she decides to hell with the diet they're trying to enforce on her for her uniform, and she eats as much damn food as she damn well pleases, which annoys the hell out of her other coworkers who begin to judge her because they're jealous of Catwoman a little bit. Catwoman's everything that they're not. She's the one standing up for herself and doing her own thing while they're just sitting around and taking all the sexism. So they kind of pretend to hate Catwoman a little bit, but they do kind of admit that it was funny to watch the Cult of Good get beat up for once. So Oasisburg is slowly beginning to turn on the Cult of Good, little bit by little bit. They're not nearly as into them as they were before, not nearly as hypnotized. Unfortunately, though, not everyone has the best opinions of Catwoman, because we actually see two women that Selina is awkwardly forced to lotion up, talking complete trash about her. So Selina gets pissed off at them and nearly dumps soda on them, but she ends up being stopped by Louis Lane, who basically says that they're not worth it. He then talks to her about how much he wants Catwoman, and whether he means that sexually or just for his journalism story, it just sounds really weird to me. Either way, we then see that Louis also has a bandage on his hand in the same place as Brock does. Lazy writing, if you ask me. And so now we're basically onto a new subplot, which is trying to figure out which man is Captain God. Oh boy, do I hate this, but let's see how it goes. So we then cut to a very depressed Selina, who's actually drinking her troubles away at the bar. It's finally daunting on her that the two men she cares about the most in this city, well, one of them is the man who's trying to kill her, and that's really haunting her. And now we actually see the black cat that's been following her around this entire movie, tries to follow her into the bar as well, and gets kicked for its troubles by one of the assholes there, which is a really awful thing to do, never kick a cat. But thankfully the cat is fine. We then follow the cat throughout various parts of the city, where we actually get to see the influence Catwoman is having on the female citizens, before the cat then enters the lair of the Cult of Good. And we see the cult are having some infighting about what to do about Catwoman. Because Spooky thinks that they should just leave Catwoman alone and get the hell out of here while people still respect them. But the others, that's not good enough for them. The others want revenge. They want to leave Oasisburg on a win. They're gonna kill her no matter what it takes. So we then follow the cat throughout other parts of the city where we see some painfully sexist things. So brace yourselves, because this is hard for me to read, let alone for you to watch. So if you don't want to watch this, I understand. So we see an advertisement for breast implants, two mechanics pretending to fix a car while actually looking up a woman's skirt. Then we see a woman being broken up with by a guy who then gets drinks with another guy that broke up with her so they can talk shit about her. Classy. Then we see a stalker harassing a woman on the phone while he stares at her through a fucking telescope. Then we see a group of female students in a high school getting made fun of by their chemistry teacher, who says, of course they're good at chemistry, because it must remind them of cooking in the kitchen. Then it gets worse, because then we see a douchebag husband throw his wife's dress into the middle of the road because he says that he thinks that she's too fat for it. Oh my god, what an asshole. So now, thank God we're done with that sequence, and we cut back to Selina, who actually fixes up a motorized scooter for herself to use as Catwoman, which I admit I think is pretty cool. She then goes off on her date with Brock Leviathan, but it doesn't exactly go very well, because it gets interrupted by an army of Catwomen who wreak havoc on the streets. And now this army of Catwomen is actually made up of all the women that we previously saw in the cat sequence that were totally shit on by all the men, plus a few dozen extras that we didn't see. So yeah, this is a proper Catwoman army. So Brock desperately pushes the button calling the Cult of Good, and we see that Selina is pissed off at first to see so many people stealing her identity. So we then see the army of Catwoman absolutely destroying a beauty pageant and getting revenge on all of their husbands. Now the real Catwoman tries to use her new scooter, only for the engine to crap out on her. Damn, that's bad luck. So we then cut back to the creepy stalker with the telescope, and we see him trying to pull off his whole ghost face call routine with his victim, only when he looks through his telescope, his victim isn't a victim anymore. She's dressed up like Catwoman. He then turns around and gets ambushed by 3 more Catwomen. Ha! That's what you get. We then see that even the staff at Frank's Palace are wearing their own Catwoman outfits and are totally destroying the casino. They even dump raw sewage all over the carpet. Ugh. So we then see the Cult of Good awkwardly pulling up on Main Street, expecting it to be easy as pie, but instead they find the army of Catwomen, and they're just like, So they then pull out a giant fire hose, and they start just spraying all the Catwomen with it, which sends them running. So now, we get to a part of the script that I really hate. So, Cactus decides in this scene to make a quote-unquote joke about how this is more fun than raping people. I wish I was kidding. I'm not kidding. This is a real line in the script. Kill me now, seriously. Why would anyone write that? That's awful. So now getting back into things, we see that the real Catwoman actually has to start fending off police officers using ballerina figurines that she's actually sharpened into knives, which I think sounds pretty badass. So then we see Catwoman going to Frank's palace, where we find that all the Catwomen there have actually tied Frank to a poker table and are cutting up his clothes in the same revealing way that he sexually designed their uniforms. She then steals a whip away from one of the copycats. Haha, I know, copycat. And she claims that the whip is for her and her alone. Nobody else can do the whip thing. So she then has 2 whips to beat the shit out of some police officers like a total badass. The copycats then realize that they're looking at the original Catwoman, and they begin absolutely worshipping her and seeking her approval. She gives her approval, and together they all plan to raid DJ Oink's broadcast station after he says that Catwomen are more annoying than regular women. Jesus Christ. So now, unfortunately, the Cult of Good just have to show up and rescue DJ Oink, and they leave Mammoth behind to attack the Catwoman with a pickaxe. Now, this group actually includes 3 high school girls, by the way, and they're referred to as kittens. Either way, they actually managed to work together really well, and they kill Mammoth by knocking him off the roof. Catwoman then sends the other Catwoman home before being confronted by Captain God. Now, Catwoman says that she overheard the cult say that they're leaving town, and she asks, how do you plan to do that? And he says, well, they intend to fake their deaths by stopping a rigged heist. They want to go out as heroes. So then Captain God grabs Catwoman by the throat, and he begins throttling the life out of her. He calls her Selena, and then he goes on this long, boring tirade about how women are trying to soften men's hearts, yada 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 yada, sexist bullshit. However, Catwoman is luckily saved by another Catwoman with a bow and arrow, a Catwoman who later turns out to actually be her mother, believe it or not, but Captain God does survive this because the arrow went through his wrist and not through his heart, unfortunately. So we then cut to another part of the city, where we see Adonis is actually on a jetpack, and he's been using a tranquilizer gun on all the Catwomen throughout the city, knocking them all out, of course. Then Adonis crashes into the middle of the road, which is pretty funny, and Catwoman is just right there waiting to pounce on him. But unfortunately, he's saved by Cactus, who does a really cringy quick draw against Catwoman, but they don't have guns. He's got a cannon, but she has a tennis ball shooter. Yeah, it's just as cringy as it sounds. And equally as cringily, she actually defeats him by clogging up the rocket arm using one of the tennis balls. So the rocket arm blows up and sends him shooting back against the wall, which somehow doesn't kill him. Explain that to me. So we cut to the following morning where Selena finally goes home after a long night of no sleep while she was off as Catwoman, and who does she find at her hut but Lois Lane? And now she's really suspicious about Lois Lane. She's pretty damn sure that he's Captain God, although I don't know why she wouldn't just check to see if he's got a fucking hole in his wrist, because that should make it pretty obvious, but whatever, they just forget about it for some reason. Anyway, the pair drive down the road in his golf cart, because I forgot to mention that everybody in the city drives golf carts, which is a choice they decide to make. And we see that all the tourists in the city are leaving in a hurry. And now the mayor is getting really nervous because he's about to lose a shit ton of money. So he decides to throw a big party to celebrate women because, yeah, he definitely always respected women. And this is his way of showing it. And because of course, he wants to avoid another Catwoman incident because, remember, he definitely is not a sexist. No. And so now Lois Lane actually asks Selena if she wants to go with him to this party, and she says, yeah, sure, why not, basically. So then Selena goes to work, and the mayor is absolutely pissing himself with fear that the party won't work, and he's desperately trying to convince himself that it will, so he decides to call the Cult of Good because he thinks that their presence will help the party out. So we then see the cult members' secret identities finally. We get to see that Cactus is actually a high school football coach, Spooky works in a cubicle office, and Adonis is a male model. I am so shocked that Adonis is a male model. So shocked, I tell you. So then we actually get to see that the women's confidence is thankfully not limited to just that one night when they were Catwomen, and we actually get to see them eating a lot more food than they usually do. Diets be damned, they're going against the program, and I'm so happy to hear about it, honestly. Unfortunately, though, the mood gets spoiled when they overhear DJ Oink and Cactus, the 2 best people in the world, oh boy, talking about how Cactus nearly drowned a bunch of Catwomen with his hose, and Oink says, no, I'm not kidding, he says that's where women belong, and he should have gotten it on film. Oh my god, seriously, why is DJ Oink the worst person in the world? Oh my god. Now, Selena, of course, is just ready to kick his fucking ass. But then she bumps into Brock, who she's also very suspicious of being Captain God. So we get to see Brock and Lewis actually meeting for the very first time, and they end up going through the very stereotypical dick measuring contest that we're all kind of tired of seeing, honestly. So Selena just walks away, lol, and decides that she'd rather dance with Spooky, who's all by herself. Now, Selena, it should be noted, doesn't even pretend that Spooky's a man. She knows damn well she's a woman. But, of course, the moment has to be ruined by Brock and Lewis ogling them, even though, again, people aren't supposed to know that Spooky's a woman. I don't get it either. Either way, that's when Selena is very upfront with the fact that she knows that she's a woman, and Spooky gets, well, spooked, I guess, and hightails it the hell out of there. We then see the mayor give a very long and pandering speech about equality and how he's always believed in equality, obviously. And then, of course, he just has to throw in a barb about how his wife was attacked by the Catwoman, although it actually turns out she was one of the Catwomen. Then we hear from Penelope Snuggle, who gives a speech about how she hopes that women learned a lesson last night about how the Catwoman complex can make women more ugly. Eesh, god, geez, everybody in this movie is mean. So now Selena actually retreats into the bathroom where she's confronted by Spooky, who's no longer wearing her costume. And she's figured out that she's Catwoman. So now she warns her that she's infuriating a great leader in Captain God. So we actually see that she's like really brainwashed by Captain God's abilities. Like she's head over heels in love with him and she totally believes in him. It's like a real cult. So the pair decide that they obviously are not going to be able to sell their differences via words, so they go into the stalls to change into their respective costumes. Although we actually do notice that Spooky is no longer trying to hide her gender, because really, what's the point at this point? And then Selena makes a comment about how she has nice boobs. Did I mention that man wrote this script? Either way, the pair would then get into a fight in the bathroom, which leads to a very strange sequence that involves the other women entering the bathroom one by one, changing into their Catwoman outfits to join into the huge cat fight. Ugh. So now this fight was going to be pretty stereotypical. Most of them were actually going to be fighting each other because, oh, how dare they steal each other's look, and how, oh, they're so jealous of how attractive the others look in their suit. It's just kind of stupid, in my opinion. And this was all going to lead to a really dumb joke about the men waiting around for the women to leave the bathroom. They're like looking at their watches. And then they make a joke about the women taking too long in the bathroom. Do I even need to tell anyone why this joke isn't funny? So then the fight would actually spill outside the bathroom, but with the door actually coming off. And the men just keep on ogling, of course, because that's what men always do, of course, really. So then Spooky knocks Catwoman unconscious, and she goes to meet Captain God to say that she doesn't want to be part of the heist plan anymore. And of course, Captain God says, oh, it's just like a woman to back out at the last second. So then Cactus and Adonis would then pop up, and the three of them actually beat her up. Captain God actually says that superheroism is mankind's highest achievement, and Spooky has no place by their side for being a woman. And now Spooky obviously feels extremely betrayed by that, because she was so loyal to him. She tries to say that her gender shouldn't matter, and she confesses that she loved Captain God. And he says simply that he knows, and then he shoots her 3 times. Damn. So then Catwoman actually rushes over to her side, and unfortunately, though, it's too late for Spooky. She's going to die. So in her dying breath, she gives Catwoman exactly what she needs to defeat the cult. A piece of gold that we don't know anything about yet, and a computer disk that actually contains all of the Cult of Goods plans for the heist, as well as their past plans. She then reveals that her real name is Rachel, before dying. And we see that Catwoman is visibly shaken by this death. Like, she's not pretending like it's fun at all. Like, this is genuinely making her tear up. And so then we cut to Selena going to the library to read the files. And she finds that the cult is actually stolen from and blown up a museum in both Atlanta and St. Louis, where they actually use different names, such as the Gatekeepers of Justice and the Awesome Power Squad. Yes, I know those names are absolutely horrible. So now, rather conveniently though, the data for tonight's heist is scrambled up and she can't read it. So she then actually sees in the files that both Brock and Lewis were in Atlanta around the same time of the museum heist. Of course they were. So she then decides that she has to know once and for all which one of them is Captain God. And at this point, I'm getting a little tired of the mystery too. So she actually decides to bring both Brock and Lewis together at the casino. And she admits her suspicions that one of them is Captain God, and also confesses to being Catwoman. Selena then explains what she read on the computer, and Lewis tries saying that he knew the Cult of Good were faking their deaths and had been following them for years trying to expose them. Brock, however, also claims that it couldn't have been him, of course, because his sister died from the museum explosion, and he would, of course, have no reason to kill her. So now Selena gets a little bit frustrated because they're both good excuses, and she just storms off. So after storming off, Selena goes back to her house to find that her hut has actually been set on fire, and Cactus and Adonis are both there to interrogate her about where the disc is. But she actually doesn't know where it is because it isn't where she left it. Perfect! So they say that they're going to kill her either way, which is a really smart interrogating tactic, by the way, and Selena says that if they kill her without Captain God there, he's probably going to be a little bit pissed off, and they agree. So they actually give her a Catwoman suit, and then they knock her unconscious. She wakes up dangling from the ceiling of the cult lair, and Captain God cuts her down, though, immediately, so what was the point in that? I have no idea. And they say that they actually don't need the disc. Captain God then says that he does feel bad that he's going to have to kill her because he was genuinely attracted to her as Selena Kyle. So we then learn that the Cult of Good actually used to be genuine superheroes. But they turned bad because, well, for one thing, superheroes don't get paid, but also they felt they weren't getting enough true respect. They say that the people never truly respected them. They only admired them because they saved people. They didn't actually care about them as people. Like, if one of them got hurt, they didn't really care about them. They cared about themselves. So they just got tired of the whole hero gig. And they actually, in my opinion, do a good job of explaining why they wanted to stop being heroes. I honestly think this plot point actually would have been pretty interesting to explore if done right. Captain God then exclaims that there's no such thing as heroes and villains anymore, only winners and losers. Oof, rough. So then they place Catwoman in a red car on a car wash track, which begins shooting acid at the car, but luckily Catwoman rolls up the windows in time because glass stops acid, I guess. Then a bunch of spikes cut through the car on each side, followed by snakes being dropped in through the sunroof, though she does manage to backflip through the back windshield onto the track. She then stops the spikes by jamming the wires with one of her sawed-off ballerina figures, and I still maintain that those are really cool ideas for weapons. She then murders Adonis, who is left behind to guard her, and then Catwoman actually escapes, only to find an angry mob who realize, Catwoman's presence really has been fucking up their town by making the women just go absolutely crazy. So Catwoman has to escape on her bike, though this time the bike actually finally starts working, thank God, and we see the various oppressed women of Oasisburg that were the Catwoman before, then they're watching the news reports on Catwoman, and we see them all symbolically giving up their Catwoman identities, which DJ Oink is having a field day about, by the way. Oh, if they were all so inspired, then where's Catwoman's help now, and stuff like that. And he even says, and I'm not kidding, quote unquote, women are doing what they do best, vacuuming and being afraid. Oh boy, do I hate DJ Oink. So then we get an absolutely epic chase sequence throughout the streets of Oasisburg, which shows off Catwoman's new skills with the scooter. She manages to avoid the police, the angry mob, and the Cult of Good all at the same time. But in the end, it's actually Catwoman who gets the last laugh, because the National Guard show up, and you think that they would be there for her, but no, they're actually there for the Cult of Good. Because it turns out actually that Selena's mom, dressed up as Catwoman, actually gave the disc to the authorities, exposing their criminal history. So then the cult tries to escape, only to be blown up by a tank. So then we actually find out that Captain God was Lewis. Yeah, it was Lewis, not Brock, like you might expect. And Lewis actually dies right there on the street. So then Selena's mom admits that maybe she messed up with her. That, maybe she shouldn't have been so harsh on her daughter. She then confesses that it was her who fixed up the bike for her. And the pair have a nice, mother-daughter moment. Then Brock shows up, and the pair finally get to have their kiss that they've been trying to do the whole movie. I'd rather she was with Bruce, but I'll let go. So then the pair return to his mansion. They're talking about running away across the world together. And we actually learn, unfortunately, that the movie sadly isn't over yet because Cactus slipped away into the sewer and Brock wants revenge because, well, he did help to kill his sister. And Catwoman agrees to help him. Unfortunately, though, then Cactus shows up and Brock backhands Selina across the face. Yep, it turns out it was actually Brock who was Captain God all along. Yep, I should have trusted my instincts. It turns out he dressed up Lewis like Captain God and left him to be framed. So then the butler Jeff actually sticks Selina with a syringe that makes her catatonic. And Brock explains that his sister actually did die, but only because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He then leaves her to die of the poison she was just injected with, but then the Black Cat comes in and sucks the poison out of her arm. Yeah, it's stupid. She then kills Jeff, only for her cat to then be killed by Brock's dog, which Selina then kills. Oh boy, that's really pleasant. That's not depressing at all. So then we see Selina's mother come in with a video cassette that was actually left for her by Lewis. And Lewis reveals that the heist will actually be at Frank's palace. So now Selina knows everything that she needs to know. So she puts on her Catwoman suit and she decides it's finally time to take down the cult of good for good. So we then see Captain God and Cactus show up at Frank's palace during a very conveniently timed diamond unveiling ceremony. Oh boy. And Captain God actually reveals himself as Brock Leviathan. And he exploits the fact that he actually designed the casino. He seals all the entrances and exits shut with electrified metal plates. He then turns the ventilation shaft into a giant vacuum cleaner to suck all the diamonds out. Well, that's one way of getting it out, I guess. Brock would then set up a motion sensor bomb around him and Cactus, preventing anybody from moving. He and Cactus then speed away on their motorcycles, leaving the people of Oasisburg condemned to death by explosion. We then see Cactus attach the chest full of diamonds to a balloon, which will reach an undisclosed rendezvous point at the same time the casino explodes. However, before Cactus can meet up with Brock, he's stopped in his tracks by an army of alley cats, which he very carefully tiptoes around before finding the next alley is filled with cat women who absolutely maul him. So he hurries out onto the street only for the Catwoman to actually shoot the balloon, causing the chest of diamonds to fall and crush Cactus to death. Wow, that's a million way to die, isn't it? So we then cut to Brock and Catwoman actually fighting each other to the death. It's the climactic final battle between these two. And Brock tries to convince her that they need to team up and forget all this hero stuff. He says being the villain is more fun anyway. And Catwoman agrees because she's not really a hero, but she says that fun is overrated and she needs something real. She wants something real. And so then she manages to knock Brock out the window and escape. However, Brock of course isn't dead. Kind of a regular thing in this movie, isn't it? So it's now that we finally see Catwoman come into her own as a leader. She manages to rile together all of the Catwomen, and together they all climb up on the outside of the casino, intent on breaking in through the skylight, which is really the only way they can get in at this point. So they form a human chain actually down to the bomb, which Catwoman manages to defuse at the last second by using the same gold brick that she got from Spooky. That turns out to be what it was going to be for. But unfortunately, Brock ruins the victory party by launching a rocket he had hidden in his chest plate into the casino. Now, the rocket is actually targeted for Selina in particular because it turns out that there's actually a tracking device in a ring that he gave her earlier in the movie. Now, she tries to take the ring off, but it's stuck on. So now a huge chase throughout the casino ensues, which ends with Selina actually managing to get the ring off. She then throws it at Brock, causing him to finally blow up and die. Thank God. So now we cut ahead a little while, and we see the mayor actually unveiling a statue of Catwoman, with intentions of giving her the key to the city, but she decides not to appear. You see, in a narration, she says that she didn't want the attention or the key to the city, but despite that, Oasisburg actually builds her a cat equivalent of the bat signal, or I should call it, I guess, a cat signal, and we see that she actually owns Frank's palace now, which has now been renamed to Selina's palace. We see that she's actually buried DJ Oink up to his neck in sand, hell yeah, and leaves him to be killed by cats. Fuck yeah! Catwoman then ends the movie by driving off across the desert planes on her bike, ready for whatever comes next as Oasis's unlikely hero. The end. So, what do I think of this? This is the part of the video that I've been looking forward to getting to the most. This was an exhausting video, definitely the longest one I've done in a very long time. I've been recording since early this morning, and I'm currently doing this part at 1 in the morning. So yes, now I'm finally at the part where I get to talk about what I think of this movie, and my answer is, it's not good. Sorry. At least this draft isn't good. I don't think this movie is entirely bad. The script is not all bad. It has its moments. I think Catwoman is still just as badass as she always is. And I don't hate the idea of the movie at all. I love the idea of getting out of Gotham. I think that would really help to make the Catwoman movie feel like a Catwoman movie and not like a Catwoman and Batman movie, you know? To get her away from Batman and into a scenically radically different place than Batman Returns with its snow, I think that would have been great, just to see something completely different aesthetically. It also would have been kind of interesting to see a town so cultishly devoted to a group of heroes, and those same heroes, you know, hating the fact that heroes never really get the recognition they feel they deserve. Like, there's a lot of potential in this story. There really is. I even like the idea of exploring Selina's relationship with her mom. I mean, it was hinted in Batman Returns that their relationship was far from good, but now we actually get to see it front and center exactly what their dynamic is. And, you know, we get to see them making amends at the end, and I like that. And I also like the idea of Catwoman kind of inspiring all these women to become Catwoman in their own right, showing that anybody can be a hero, anybody can make a difference. Honestly, I don't hate the message of this movie at all, but I don't hate that part of the message anyway. The rest of the movie, holy shit. Where to begin? The Cult of Good. I keep wanting to call them the Cult of Heroes. Goddamn. The Cult of Good. Maybe it's because the Cult of Heroes sounds better. But the Cult of Good. For one thing, they have crappy names. Like, all of those members have absolute crappy names, in my opinion. And all of them are just so boring. Like, legitimately, the only character that I found remotely interesting was Spooky, and she ends up being killed before we really get a chance to explore her, and that's really disappointing, in my opinion. And yeah, the rest of the members are just all cliches, you know? Because, you know, Captain God, he's just the typical leader. Mammoth is the typical muscle guy. Adonis is the typical pretty boy. You know, Cactus is the typical gunslinger. You know, there's nothing interesting about any of the villains, really, except for how they feel about the way superheroes are treated. That's about it. Like, there's nothing else really about them that stands out to me, except for the fact that one of them made a rape joke. Seriously, why would they do that? No. Speaking of that, this movie has a terrible sense of humor, in my opinion, in this script, I mean. And, okay, as far as the sexism goes, I get what they're trying to go for. I really do. I understand that Daniel Waters was trying to do a whole female empowerment story with, you know, male oppressed women of the entire city. I really do understand that. But there's a little thing called subtlety. Subtlety is one of the best things that has ever been invented, and this movie has none of it. I mean, I'm sorry, but every single thing that Daniel Waters is trying to do is so painfully obvious. There's no subtlety to it at all. It's so forced. I'm sorry, but it is. And it's painfully depressing. You know what I mean? It's not one of those movies that you can watch, like, and the bad stuff happens to the character and you root for them. It's not like it works like that in Spider-Man 2, where you see Peter Parker going through so much crap in that movie, but it doesn't make you not want to watch it. You know what I mean? It doesn't make you depressed. It makes you want to see him get over it. This is a script that makes me want to turn it off. Like, if I was watching this movie, I wouldn't endure, even if, like, all the people who are horrible got their comeuppance, because it's just not something I'd want to see. You know, I'm a guy, and this movie, you know, not only does it make women look horrible, but it makes men look horrible. It just makes everybody look horrible. It makes men look like absolutely horrible people, and it makes, you know, they never settle. They always make fun of women. They tell women, oh, you do this, and oh, they just make so many sexist jokes, and I hate it. it. I know I'm rambling and raving, but seriously, like this script was so unpleasant to read. I really hated reading the script for this movie. I really hated it. And apparently Tim Burton didn't like the script. Gee, I wonder why. And funny thing is that apparently he did the script for Batman Returns and Tim Burton didn't like it, so he brought in Wesley Strick to fix it. And I think that the same thing would have had to happen with this, because like, man, I don't want to say Daniel Waters has no talent, because I'm sure he does, but and I know this is a first draft script, so I'm not like saying his whole career is based on how terrible the script is, but you know, the fact of the matter is he took months to write this. It's like I don't understand how somebody can take months to write something this bad. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And you guys know I love Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. I've been making videos on her for over 2 years now. Like, she's absolutely one of my favorite superhero movie characters of all time, if not my favorite. So you guys know I really wanted to like this script. I really wanted to be like, oh, this is one of those movies that pisses me off it didn't get made. And in a way it does. She should have gotten her own movie. But if it was going to be like this, I'm glad it didn't get made. Like, Michelle Pfeiffer, you deserve so much better than this script. This script is just an insult, in my opinion. An absolute insult. I legitimately feel like this movie would piss off anybody that watched it. It would piss off men and women alike. It would set female superhero movies back even further. Like, I'm honestly fit to say at this point that I think, despite this few good things about this script, that it's actually worse than the Halle Berry one. I'm not kidding. I actually think the Halle Berry one is better than this. Like, the Halle Berry one's really terrible. Don't get me wrong, but like, it almost is an improvement on this, because like characters like DJ Oink, especially. Oh my God, DJ Oink he's so painfully unlikable, and I know you're not supposed to like him, but like it's so awful. Like, he's just such an awful character, and if a movie is filled with too many awful characters, then you don't care. You don't want to get invested. You just want to turn it off. And I have to say, I almost quit this video several times when I was making it. Like, not even just while I was recording, while I was just reading the script, I was almost like, oh, I'm not going to do this. Like, I don't want to do it. Like, that's how much I hated reading the script. Like, it was just, it really pissed me off, this script. So, yeah, overall, if the movie was going to be like this, and I'm not saying it would be, because, again, this was a first draft. Wesley Strick probably would have been brought in to fix it, or maybe Daniel Waters would write it again and improve. I don't know. I'm sure that the movie, if they had done it, if they had changed it, it would have been a good movie. Hopefully as good as Batman Returns, if not better. But this script, if they had adapted this script, it might have been one of the worst superhero movies of all time, bar none. Like, it might have been worse than Halle Berry's Catwoman, and it might have even been worse than Jack Black's Green Lantern, which ultimately never got made because it's a really horrible script. This actually might be worse than that. Like, this might be the worst script I've ever read. I'm not kidding. It really does sadden me how bad this script is. Catwoman deserves so much better, and I'm hearing that Zoe Kravitz is going to be getting her own Catwoman movie, and I'm all for it. Please don't screw it up as badly as you did with Halle Berry or with this script. Please, Catwoman needs a really good movie. She really deserves one, and I'm desperately hoping that Michelle Pfeiffer comes back in the Flash movie. That would be a dream come true for me. But, you know, because I'm sad that she only got to play her once, but if she got to play her twice and her second time was this, then I'm honestly glad it was a one and done. I'm not kidding. Like, I would rather see her the one time than see her in this. Like, this script is so awful. It's really cringy. I'm sorry. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just so bad, guys. But anyway, maybe you guys disagree with me. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this script. Do you think it's terrible? Do you think that there's something about it that I'm missing? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, give me more what-if recommendations about Catwoman or anything else you can think of. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms. And I'll see everybody in the next video.